Modern animal rights activism tactics, part investigative journalism, part corporate warfare. How PETA's expose of the monkey imports by the largest experimenter in the U.S. could bring us closer to ending animal experimentation. Oh, that's with a little help from the SEC. Next on the PETA Podcast with Emil Guillermo. Welcome to the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo, your host for this inside look at animal rights, brought to you by PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world. On today's episode, it's a case study in progress, how PETA is on the verge of toppling Charles River Laboratories, one of the largest experimenters and monkey importers in the world. One problem: did the publicly traded Charles River Labs lie to shareholders about bringing wild-caught monkeys to America to be tortured for useless experiments? Just importing wild-caught monkeys would be a violation. Did shareholders know? PETA, a shareholder, filed a complaint with the Securities and Exchange Commission, and now the SEC is investigating, and it may be the straw that breaks the experimenter's back, as now Charles River is talking about beginning to explore non-animal methods. Just a ruse or for real? PETA isn't letting up now that it's uncovered documents, that's the journalistic aspect, that's making the SEC look into Charles River's questionable importation of wild monkeys. Dr. Lisa Jones-Engel, PETA primatologist, once again breaks down the Charles River Labs case and how it could be the beginning of the last chapter in animal experimentation. My conversation with Dr. Lisa Jones-Engel on the PETA Podcast with Emil Guillermo. This is really a case that shows how animal activism is fought these days. And increasingly, it's done in the boardrooms. It's done as shareholders complaining about how a corporation misbehaves. And PETA is a shareholder of Charles River.
We are. And to your point, this fight is also a fight about something that PETA does really well, which is we got into the weeds. We dug so deeply into, what other folks would just kind of discard as just kind of meaningless paperwork, but which we saw these certificates of veterinary inspection, this movement of monkeys. I mean, that was kind of, those were the glowing documents for us, because that allowed us to follow monkeys from this monkey farm in Cambodia to another farm here to Charles Rivers.
And the funny thing is, no one else was doing it but PETA, right?
I don't know whether it's funny. I think is a sign of activism is changing. And these companies are getting incredibly sophisticated. They've always dealt in secrecy. And I think what they understand now is that they're up against activist opponents who know which doors to open. We know which file cabinet to pull a drawer out from. We know which agency to poke and say, hey, I need this document. And boy, they're afraid, because now we've got the keys. We've got the receipts.
Yeah.
Literally, we have the receipts.
Yeah, the evidence. Okay, so let's go to the beginning. The complaint filed with the SEC, the Securities Exchange Commission. This is important because you're saying that the SEC should investigate Charles River Labs. Tell me the complaint and the significance of the complaint.
So last week, we went to the Division of Enforcement at the SEC, Security and Exchange Commission. And the thing about the SEC is it's about the money. It's about making sure that companies are being responsible to the shareholders who invest in those companies. And so the SEC is that watchdog. And we've seen in the past that the SEC will crack down on companies that have engaged in activities that have cost shareholders money. And what we understood, the conclusion that we came to with Charles River is, you know what, Charles River, you don't seem to care about the endangered status of monkeys. You don't seem to care about the disease risks that you're bringing in here. You don't seem to care about the fact that these monkeys are just not good models. You know what you do care about? You care about money. You care about profit. And we are going to go at you from that angle. And we're going to use the SEC to do it. And this complaint is a thing of beauty, Emil. I mean, it's 360 pages long. And it's just clean
And
because it's not.
what do you ask that the SEC do? And what are you alleging that was done by Charles River?
So to kind of sum it up in a nutshell, we said to the SEC, we need you to investigate Charles River's claims to its shareholders and also to its clients, the people who are buying the monkeys. Charles River's claims that they are only using purpose-bred monkeys, that they're only supplying purpose-bred monkey. So let me explain for a second what a purpose-bred monkey is. A purpose-bred monkey is basically, it's kind of the bedrock of the biomedical industry. And it is a monkey who has been born and raised and followed in captivity, who has purposely been kind of created, raised in a controlled environment where you know the parents, you know the health status. You've had veterinarians who have been monitoring them from birth. They're supposed to be clean and disease-free, well characterized. It's the essence of what is considered to be the appropriate biomedical model, a purpose-bred monkey. Contrast that with a wild-caught monkey. The two they're just different beings.
Well, if you get a wild-caught monkey, do you get different results or better results? Is there a reason why they'd want wild-caught monkeys, or is it the only reason why they want a wild-caught monkey is because it decreases their cost of acquisition, say?
The only reason that anyone would use a wild-caught monkey is if they thought they could get away with it. And as you said, because it's cheaper. And it's easier to get your hands, ironically, on a wild-caught monkey than it is a purpose-bred monkey. And that is a reflection of what we've known for decades, which is monkeys, you can't breed them in captivity. It doesn't work. It doesn't work to take these highly social animals, put them in these small cages or put them in these corrals, divorced of all of their social systems, divorced of everything that makes them a monkey, and expect them to produce infants, offspring. It doesn't work. The moms aren't, they don't know how to be good moms because they've never learned. The male that's in with them tends to be really aggressive. Diseases run through. And just to try to get a purpose-bred monkey, yeah, you get some. You get a small number, but that number has never been big enough to feed this industry.
So this provides a motive. In order to get the monkey population up, they have to supplement the purpose-bred with the wild-caught. And while it's legal to deal with purpose-bred monkeys, it's not legal to take the wild monkey.
You know what? This is where it gets even more complicated. And this is part of the SEC complaint. So let me see if I can break this down. Some countries allow wild-caught monkeys to be exported to the U.S. For example, Mauritius allows wild-caught monkeys. Indonesia allows wild-caught monkeys. Cambodia does not allow wild-caught monkeys. But even if a country allows wild-caught monkeys, the first question that you should be asking this industry is, why would you use a wild-caught monkey? If that monkey, a wild-caught monkey, just think about them as an incredibly heterogeneous, uncontrolled monkey. And wow, in the biomedical industry, you don't like heterogeneity. They want control, and a wild monkey on every immunological and behavioral and biological variable is an uncontrolled animal.
Wow, so it makes the science even worse than it could be.
Let me give you an example to this. And this, I think it gives you a sense of actually how bad it is right now. A few months ago, Novo Nordisk, a huge pharmaceutical company, actually the company that is responsible for Ozempic, as a matter of fact, few months ago, Novo Nordisk announced in an interview, whoops, sorry, we just learned that our American company that we acquired called Dicerna apparently used wild monkeys in some of our studies. We did not want to use wild monkeys. This is Novo Nordisk talking. We didn't think we were using wild monkeys. This is a new company. They apparently didn't understand the rules, like you don't use wild monkeys in biomedical experiments, but they did. And so now we need to go back and do those experiments because, and again, this is Novo Nordisk, huge pharmaceutical company, saying any scientist worth their salt knows you don't use wild monkeys.
But what happens now, if they have to redo the experiments, they have to take new monkeys and torture more monkeys to get the kind of results that aren't going to yield anything in the first place, right?
Yes. And let me give you another example. If you humor me on this one.
Yeah.
Another paper very recently published here in the US, pharmaceutical company. They were testing a drug that they had, and they had 42 monkeys on it, 42 long-tailed macaques. They put in their experimental compound, they pulled the bits and pieces out of the monkeys, and they were like, oh gosh, we see in some of our animals, there's liver toxicity. And they were like, oh gosh, golly gee willikers, our drug must be causing damage to the liver toxicity. So I guess we can't use it. 42 monkeys were used on this study. Someone went back and thought, God, that just seems so weird because even our control animals, the monkeys who did not receive our experimental drug, some of them showed liver toxicity. They went back to their necropsy samples in the freezer and they realized, well, good grief, some of these supposedly purpose-bred, clean, healthy monkeys actually had hepatitis A infections. Boy. So what this meant was this company, one, if they hadn't realized that drug would have stayed on the shelf because it had proven to be toxic in the monkey model. So what do you do with that? You stick it back on the shelf. They realized that, but that meant they went out and they used another 42 monkeys. 42 monkeys is the average size of a long-tailed macaque troop, an entire troop of monkeys. This experiment, for one experimental drug, went through 2 troops of macaques. And who knows how much money they spent. Again, because what we understand now is that inside this whole pipeline are these wild-caught, non-purpose-bred monkeys.
All right, so we know the difference between the wild-caught. You shouldn't use them. You should use purpose-bred monkeys, but there's not enough of them, so people are wild-catching them. Charles River, you found the documents, I guess, through Freedom of Information Act. That's how you found out. And you document the travel of the monkeys from Cambodia to the United States.
It was actually, it took a few more steps than that. So, what Charles River did back in February of 2023, when we first learned that they had been subpoenaed, and we first learned that, 1,000+ monkeys that they had imported from Cambodia had been refused clearance by Fish and Wildlife. At about that time, Charles River came out and said, hey, that bad farm in Cambodia, that Vanny farm, that's not our supplier. We don't look at us. We don't get our monkeys from that farm. We do not have a direct supply. And they used the word direct. What we discovered was, okay, yeah, Charles River, you don't have a direct supply. What you do is you wait for worldwide primates to import thousands of monkeys into the US, into their facility in Florida. And then you buy monkeys from them. And you then sell those monkeys or you use those monkeys in your studies. And so maybe it's not direct.
Is it still illegal?
Well, is it still illegal? We're going to wait for the DOJ to sort that one out, because what we learned recently in that Miami trial that took place about the Cambodian official who was indicted and arrested and went on trial, he was ultimately acquitted. But what we learned in that trial, which was so clear, were a couple of things. One, Charles River Laboratories was considered a VIP client of this monkey farm, Vanny. and 2, worldwide primates and Orient Bioresources, aka Innovative. Man, monkeys were flowing from this farm, this Vanny farm in Cambodia, into these facilities here in the US.
And so your complaint to the SEC, does it have the effect of possibly shutting down that flow of monkeys that you referred to, the flow of wild monkeys? And can it hamper or punish Charles River Labs for what they are alleged to have done?
What this complaint is focused on is basically calling Charles River to the mat because they've lied to their shareholders. They have said in their SEC filings, in their public statements, in their response to us when we go to them, they were saying, hey, we only use purpose-bred monkeys. We had nothing to do with these Cambodian monkeys. Go away. And what this complaint lays out for the SEC is, we can show you how Charles River is using these monkeys. They may not be importing them directly, but they are certainly using these monkeys that are coming in from this facility. And this is in the Cambodian one. And then we also show how Charles River has been selling wild-caught monkeys to its clients.
To other people. So Charles River Labs, one of the biggest players in Boston, how large are they in terms of as an experiment firm that uses monkeys? Are they the largest in the country?
They're the largest in the world, as far as we know.
Largest in the world. So you're going after the top people or the top company, and you seemingly have the goods. What can the SEC do? Can they shut them down? Can they say, stop your actions? Or what can they do on behalf of the shareholders? Because the SEC is out there protecting the shareholders too.
The SEC is to protect the shareholders. The SEC can levy astonishingly large fines. We're not talking this pittance that the USDA occasionally comes out and slaps somebody with. We're talking, tens of millions of dollars in fines. And it has to do with basically the scope, the sheer scale of the deception that Charles River has been engaged in with their shareholders.
Well, let's talk about how many monkeys are we talking about? Because if you're talking about tens of millions of dollars in fines, is that just because of the value per monkey, or is it because of the number of monkeys is so large? Because we mentioned a troop is 48. How many troops are we talking about of macaques? How large is this alleged transgression on the part of Charles River?
So one of the things that we learned during the trial back in March is that during this investigation from 2017 to 2022, an estimated 50,000 long-tailed macaques were brought into that Vanny farm. Wild-caught, long-tailed, 50,000 of them. And 30,000 of those animals made their way to the U.S.
Wow, 30,000. And how much per monkey? What does a monkey cost on, when Charles River is using them and also selling them to clients? What are we talking about?
So, I think a nice average number in that period of time, let's go with 40,000, because, it's over the past couple of years, that number has hit close to 60,000.
Wow, that's a lot.
So what's 30,000 times 40,000? And actually, you know what? Not all of those went to Charles River, absolutely. But we are talking, I think there's a billion in that. There's a whole lot of zeros.
Yeah, it broke my computer.
Yeah. There's a whole lot of zeros with that.
And so this is not insignificant. This is why the SEC, and in Boston, where, like I said, Charles River employs a lot of people. It's a big local story, but also a big national and international story. If what comes out of these sales could impact people worldwide who might be waiting for some kind of drug to come out of these experiments, which they probably won't, because the experiments don't really yield that much. But people around the world who are hoping for something good.
Exactly. There are so many things wrong with this. The corruption, the secrecy, the violation of national and apparently international laws. the violation of scientific integrity. All of that is wrapped up in this. Charles River sees the writing on the walls here. So early last week, we didn't know this was coming. Charles River made an announcement. They are committing $500 million, with a B, $500 million towards the development of non-animal methods, new alternative methods.
They're joining animal rights groups, it seems.
Exactly. I'm not going to say too little too late, because I think Charles River is going to start something here. If the globe's biggest consumer of monkeys is saying, all right, we are committing $500 million towards not using animals in our drug testing, that's basically saying to the rest of the pharmaceutical industry, this is the direction we're going. This is the pivot we are taking. Now, do I think that PETA being all up in their business for the last several years has a thing to do with this? Yes. Do I think the FDA Modernization Act has something to do with this? Yes. Which sounds a lot like PETA's research modernization deal, just saying that. Do I think that the IUCN listing these animals as endangered and PETA trying to get them moved up into the endangered species list has something to do with it? Yes. But I also think that pharma understands that the ultimate goal is to get the drug into the human's arm, and you do that as cheaply as you can. And if you have to keep reusing a whole troop of monkeys because your monkeys are not clean and not purpose-bred and are not giving you the right answer, then you are going to start looking at alternative methods. And Charles River is throwing the gauntlet down here.
Well, they are at least smart enough to put up what seems to be a white flag to the animal rights activists in some way.
Yeah, and that's nice. That's not going to stop me from going in hard on them on May 8th when I take our shareholder proxy to the meeting and ask them, why will you not tell your shareholders exactly where every single monkey that you're importing comes from? Why are you pushing back so hard about telling us, your shareholders, the type of zoonotic diseases that have been coming in with these animals? So I like the white flag, but it's not going to stop me from charging.
Yeah, I mean, the resolution that you're preparing, it's going to be on May 8th, and that is, once again, another part of the modern animal rights activism that we see to make people move, to make people get off the dime. You got to go to the boardrooms and you got to go with these shareholder proposals. And it sounds like this resolution. Do you know what the resolution says specifically? Do you know what you're asking for?
So what it is, we asked that the company to disclose whether it was only importing purpose-bred primates, as well as the procedures that they use to screen for and to report for the presence of zoonotic diseases among the animals. Charles River, they didn't like that. Now, keep in mind, this is similar to the resolution that we put in last year, the resolution that got 33% of the shareholder votes. 33%. I mean, that was unheard of, Emil. And of course, Charles River, as we're going back and forth on this one this time, they're like, you lost 2-1 last time. We told you we were going to give you some information. And I'm like, folks, you say I lost 2-1. I say I got a third of the shareholders to vote with us because they want to know this. And this time, as we were going back and forth with Charles River's lawyers, in the end, they said, all right, fine. We still don't want this in. We're going to fight against it. But we're going to change, rather than saying that we only import purpose-bred, we're going to change our language and say that we only acquire, what was the word that they used? Animals that are legally sourced. There we go, something like that.
Legally sourced, yeah. So it makes it sound like, well, we didn't break any laws. They may have been wild caught, but we didn't break any laws. Well, so,
exactly.
But this is apt to upset some shareholders who all they care about is whether the stock price goes up or down. And it sounds like you might get more shareholders behind you. Accidental animal rights activists, perhaps, but they care.
Well, they care about the dollar. They care about the profit. And I hope some of them actually care about the science as well. And again, it's all stacking up, Emil. And the fact that Charles River acknowledged that with this massive investment, okay, I'll take that, but that doesn't. I need them to stop now. I mean, they're still importing monkeys right now. They're still bringing in monkeys from Mauritius. They're still bringing in monkeys from Vietnam. They're bringing in animals who are infected with deadly zoonotic diseases. They're still bringing in wild-caught animals, and that can't go on. And I think what the SEC investigation is going to do is really hold their feet to the fire. And my hope is that Charles River is going to say, all right, you know what? Let's throw $1 billion at non-animal methods. Let's get the money where it needs to be. And that does not mean using money to import monkeys.
And that's how you get to progress.
So right now, what we're looking at is this kind of forest to monkey farm to pharma. And what we actually need to be is pharma focusing on non-animal methods. And I think we're getting there. Not fast enough, but it was like this, there's a huge step that's been made recently, Emil, and I'm pretty excited about it. And I'm trusting that the SEC is going to keep in mind the SEC was already investigating Charles River before we put in this complaint. They already knew something was wrong. And what we've given them is 350 pages showing them the path to the bad behavior.
Dr. Lisa Jones-Engel, PETA primatologist, explaining the SEC complaint about Charles River Labs. Lisa, thank you again for spelling it out for us and breaking it down. And good luck on May 8th.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Lisa Jones-Engel, PETA primatologist, on the Charles River Labs case the SEC is investigating. We'll be following up. You can see more about the story at PETA.org. And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to send a link of this show to your friends. Tell them you like the PETA podcast. Of course you do. You can find me on Twitter at Emil Amok. That's EMILAMOK, or shall I say X, formerly known as Twitter. Or see my vlog at amok.com. Or see my work at ALDEF, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. That's ALDEF, AALDEF.org/blog. Or see my one-man show, Emil Amok, Lost NPR host and other Amok monologues. It's at the Orlando Fringe Festival this May. And you can get this podcast on YouTube at Emil Amok 1. Once again, thank you for listening. Check out all our episodes on your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts, where you can subscribe to as well as rate and review the show. It helps get the word out about the issues you care about. Our music, It's Back, is provided by Carbonworks. Check them out on YouTube. And join us again next time for more insight into animal rights and the fight for a cruelty-free world on the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo.